So I wanted to come on here and talk about this recent development in the Jamal Sutherland situation. Now, I never got an opportunity to actually make a video talking about it. A few people that I'm sure y'all follow here on YouTube actually talked about it, the situation. But basically what happened was back in January, early January at that, of this year. As a matter of fact, January 5th, the day before what everything that went down at the Capitol. And it's crazy now that I think about it, this story probably would have gotten some traction if it wasn't for what happened the very next day. But basically what you had was the situation where you had this black man, 31 years old, named Jamal Sutherland, who was basically having a mental episode. Like he has an actual diagnosed mental illness, but in America that don't mean shit when a black person actually has a mental illness that has a diagnosis attached to it. Unless you are palm colored, then only they can get the mental illness plea. But that's going into a whole nother realm. But he basically had a mental episode, and they had these two right here come in, and they basically tased him, handcuffed him, and knelt on the back of his on his back, and pepper sprayed him. And in the midst of them doing all of that, he ended up dying. And these are the two right here that are responsible for doing that. The one on the left, her name is Lindsay Fickett, and the other one's name is Brian Hull. And what has come out now is that they have announced, and I have to make sure I put that in quotations. Had to pause the video right quick, but I'm back. But anyway, what I was saying was they just announced that they were fired. Now, I'm not going to hold my breath because we saw what just happened with Andrew Brown Jr. and them not putting any criminal charges on them terrorists that went and ambushed him and killed him. So, yeah, they fired them, quote unquote, but, we'll see what actually happens. And the one on the left, if I didn't tell you that was a woman, I knew a lot of you would swear that was a man. And I had to kind of do a double take. I said, is that a man or a woman? And I can look at her and tell that she's definitely in the academy, but she also looks like she's been to a cross burning or two. But let's get into it. 2 South Carolina cops, terrorists, have been fired over the death of a mentally ill black man who said, "I can't breathe," as they knelt on his back and tasered him in his prison cell. Jamal Sutherland, age 31, died on January 5th in the Sheriff Al Cannon Detention Center in North Charleston, while Charleston County Sheriff's deputies were forcing him from his cell for a bail hearing. Just 24 hours earlier, Sutherland had been relocated to the jail from a mental health facility. I'm trying to figure out what made them actually put him from there to there, knowing that he has mental illnesses. And then on top of that, why did they have these two deal with that? They should have sent people who have dealt with him before to come and do, to deal with that, because I'm sure they probably would have been more qualified to do this instead of sending them to. And he probably had a psychotic break because he was scared, and he didn't know them. He was in a whole new facility. And see, that's the thing. We always hear stories about a lot of people who have mental illnesses, and people ask and wonder why they never got into a facility. Here we have a man that was in a facility, but he got relocated from the facility to a jail. What happened to have him go from being in that facility to being in that prison or in that jail where he was being held at? And all he was going was for a bail hearing. Shocking body cam footage released last week shows the deputies pepper spraying, tasing, and pinning him to the ground while he cried out in pain. His death, which has drawn parallels with the murder of George Floyd, has sparked protests in South Carolina and calls for reforms in the way people with mental illness are treated in police custody. And it's crazy because, this guy actually had a diagnosed mental illness and they treated him like shit. Meanwhile, you have these PC individuals who can go around shooting up the place. They claim mental illness and they get handled with kid gloves. Charleston County Sheriff Kristen Graziano announced Monday Sergeant Lindsay Fickett and Detention Deputy Brian Hull had been fired from the department over the incident. Fickett had been employed there since March 2011 and Hull since 2016 in July 2016. Today, I made the decision to terminate the 2 detention deputies involved in this case, Graziano said in a statement on Twitter. Now, here this happened back in January. We are at the end of May, and they're just now making the decision to fire both of these fools. Well, both of these murderers, as far as I'm concerned. So it took body cam footage to come out months later, might I add, to make that decision. So they was on the payroll since then. And now they're not part of the union as far as we know. So they've been getting paid for the last few months after knowing what happened. It's not like they didn't see it because they have security footage and they have body cam footage. So you knew what was going on and you allowed them to continue to work there. That's why I don't like this right here. Doesn't faze me because we've seen this type of thing before over and over again. I must weigh the interest of public safety for the community against any incident that creates even the perception of an impairment to the operation of the detention center for the safety of all residents, staff, and our community. Perception there. That word goes again. Remember that word popped up with Andrew Brown Jr. The perception that he was doing something wrong. And there's this word again. Perception of an impairment. Both deputies have been suspended for 30 days and placed on desk duty following Sutherland's death. So they weren't fired. They were still employed. Local prosecutors are deciding whether to bring any criminal charges against the deputies. And there it is right there. This is why I say I'm not jumping for joy. And you don't leap out there prematurely. Yeah, they're fired, but they don't know if they're going to press criminal charges against them or not. Maybe Jamal Sutherland needed to be Asian, and not only would they have not only been fired immediately when it happened, but they would have also had criminal charges and hate crime charges pressed against them as well. And all of that stuff would have stuck. But then again, these are two PC individuals, so they may have not had those charges because someone within that family to that person who was Asian would have said, no, I don't want to press any charges, because we've seen that happen before too. Charleston County Solicitor Scarlett Wilson says she expected to announce a decision before the end of June. So now you got to wait a whole nother month. Officials finished their investigation on the in-custody death and turned it over to the solicitor's office. The sheriff's department is also carrying out an internal investigation. We've seen that before. Like I say, you come across one of these type of cases, you come across them all because they literally follow the same script. Every last department, for the most part, always follows the same damn script. Sutherland had been staying at Palmetto Low Country Behavioral Health Mental Facility since New Year's Eve before being moved to the jail on January 4th. His family's lawyer, Mark Pepper, said he was moved because of an incident at the health center where he was accused of a misdemeanor offense of simple assault on a nurse staff member. Okay, so now we have a reasoning as to why he was moved. Workers said a fight had broken out and Sutherland assaulted a staff member, according to the Post and the Courier. The 31-year-old and another patient were arrested on charges of third-degree assault and battery. Sutherland was not booked into the jail's medical facility because it was already at capacity. How convenient. Instead, he was taken to an area where he could be housed safely and not in an open bay area where he would be exposed to other residents. So much for safely or safety. The fatal incident took place the following day on January 5th when Sutherland allegedly resisted leaving his cell for his bail hearing around 9:30 a.m. in the morning. Graphic body cam footage was released last week by the sheriff's office at the request of Sutherland's family. The footage begins with a deputy saying Sutherland is refusing to leave his cell and has a spoon in his hand. He says the judge has said Sutherland needs to appear for his hearing. Sutherland is heard chanting something inaudible in the background, and several deputies are seen around the outside of his cell. A deputy is heard telling him to put his hands through the cell door so he can be cuffed and taken to court. Sutherland is heard shouting, I'm warning you, and what do you want? Around 15 minutes later, a deputy deploys pepper spray into Sutherland's cell before shutting the door. Sutherland is heard coughing and is seen wrapping a blanket around his head to protect from the spray. Officers deploy a pepper spray again into the cell and later deploy the taser. Sutherland is then ordered to slide to the door and get on his stomach. He is seen complying with this request, sitting on the ground of the cell and inching toward the officers while he asks what is the meaning of this. The deputies enter the cell and put him in handcuffs. Do not resist, one deputy says. I'm not resisting, officer, he replies. A deputy deploys their taser on Sutherland. Sutherland is then seen face down on the ground with his hands cuffed behind his back as he is heard screaming in pain, and the taser is heard repeatedly. A male deputy identified as Hull is seen putting his knee on Sutherland's back, pinning him to the ground for more than 2 minutes as the black man tells him, I can't breathe. A female deputy, Pickett, is seen sitting on his lower back. It is not clear how many times Sutherland was tased by the officers, but Hall later says in the footage he believes it was probably about 6 to 8 times at least. Let me tell you something. That don't let anyone thinking that kneeling or sitting on someone's back is not uncomfortable. I've been to the chiropractor a couple of times, and when they do the little press on your back to like work the kink out before they actually do the alignment, that stuff hurts. That's because when they're getting those knots out, and that's just them pressing their knuckles and the part of their fist into your back. So if that has some aching, I guess you can say capabilities, then a knee with all your pressure and all your weight and sitting on someone's back, with your butt and using all of your weight, like dead weight, like you just drop your weight. So you had this guy on one part of his back and another on the other part of his back. Of course he wouldn't be able to breathe. That literally closes in your breathing capacity. And yes, that is some agonizing pain when you're there for a significant amount of time. Now, mind you, this guy had that was happening to him while he was being pepper sprayed and tased and had the knee on his back. He had all of that going on. Like, he literally couldn't go nowhere, and he had cuffs on, so he really couldn't get out of that. A motionless Sutherland is pulled out of his cell into the common area where taser barbs are removed from his body and he is lifted into a wheelchair. Around 3 minutes has passed since they first entered his cell. A medic is asked to check him and check his pulse. The medic says he is breathing and he is lifted again down onto the floor. His pulse is checked again while several people are seen standing around looking down on the black man lying limp on the floor. At one point, Sutherland is asked if you think you can sit up. When he fails to respond, they check his vital signs and pulse and says he has a pulse. Paramedics later arrive on the scene and are seen performing CPR on him and hooking him up to a chest compression machine. After about 35 minutes, Sutherland is pronounced dead. My thing is, did he even have a pulse, or were they just lying about it? From footage from the day before shows Sutherland arriving at the jail and shouting about the Illuminati conspiracy. Sutherland's family called for the deputies' firings last week. His mom, Amy Sutherland, said the family weren't even told about his death for 4 hours and had never been informed he had been transferred to the jail. That's crazy. And they're supposed to know about that because they're the ones that checked him in to the facility. So there's a disconnect between that facility and that jail that he went to, and not telling the family that he went there. So now the facility that they had him in, now they're going to be pulled into this because they didn't tell the family that their loved one was being moved. And they're supposed to know everything that goes on with him. And that one thing right there, they didn't tell him. That possibly could have saved his life. We got no information from anybody, she said. Graziano, who took over the department the day Sutherland died, has vowed to reform the way the mentally unwell individuals are handled by law enforcement. Well, here's the thing. I'm almost certain they probably dealt with this kind of thing before, maybe, possibly. Why didn't you deal with it then? Why does it have to take a black man being tortured to death, because that's basically what it was torture, for them to want to make a move? At this point, it's already too late. He's dead. He's not coming back. The incident drew comparisons to last year's death of George Floyd, who died after the terrorist Derek Chauvin knelt on his neck for more than 9 minutes as he begged for air and said, "I can't breathe." Chauvin was convicted in April of Floyd's murder and is due to be sentenced in June. This is a very sad situation right here. Like, it's so much going on with this particular case right here. It's not even, well, first off, it's definitely not funny by a long shot, but that's just crazy. Like, it's messed up for sure, for sure. Like, this guy right here did not deserve this. But that just shows you how they deal with them versus how they deal with us when it comes to mental incapacitation. Excuse me. But yeah, like, I couldn't even bring myself to watch the video. That's why I couldn't even bring myself to do an actual video about it. But I had to talk about this, so that's me bringing attention and awareness to this story because it's not really moving like that. But then again, there's a lot of stories that aren't moving that should be. And this guy got killed in the jail. But this can also be seen like with Sandra Bland. But, you know, they tried to say that she committed suicide. But I just don't believe that this woman committed suicide. I don't. I do offer my condolences to this man's family, because they don't deserve anything that's going on right now as it pertains to this story right here involving the death of their loved one. They didn't know about him being moved or anything like that. And they said they didn't know about his death until 4 hours after he was dead. They didn't know he got moved to another facility. Like, they just left the family completely in the dark about this whole situation. And then they just now saw the body cam footage and the footage as a whole when it came to this. And I know that just opened up some wounds for them, because it's like, you heard about how he died, or you heard about him dying, but you might not even know how he died. But now you had to actually witness it. So yeah, they got fired. So what? What's them criminal charges going to be looking like? Are they going to walk? And if they do get criminal charges for them, we'll be following the case and see if they actually get convicted of whatever it is that they charged with. Until then, I will hold my celebrations. Just like I'm not celebrating a damn thing until I find out what Derek Chauvin is going to be sentenced with. And then and only then, depending on what he's sentenced with, if I'm satisfied with it, meaning I want him, if he doesn't even get the max, I want him to get close to the max. Don't give him the bare minimum of whatever it is that he can get. Then and only then will I actually be happy. Same thing with this. Same thing with Kim Potter. We as black people cannot jump the gun and cut the Jubilee jig, as I like to call it, when they just fire someone or when they charge someone. No, you got to wait for the whole process to be done. And then with this, if it's the result that we desire, then we go forward. But y'all let me know what y'all think about this down in the comments, and I'll talk to you in the next one.